Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's Common Ground. I'm Malva Kajali, the events assistant here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a very special conversation between Yoram Roth, Mitch Joachim, and our very own editor-at-large, Paul D. Miller, aka DJ Spooky. We're also thrilled to have the writer and many other things, Alissa Quart, here today with us, who will read to close today's program. To begin, I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and the Shinnecock Indian Nation, the traditional owners of Lenapehoking, the unceded land and waters on which we stand. The Brooklyn Rail also stands in continual solidarity with the uprisings in response to the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Nina Pop, David McAtee, James Scurlock, Jamel Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, Rhea Milton, Dominique Remy Fells, Toyin Salau, Walter Wallace Jr., Casey Goodson, and countless others we have lost to white supremacy and police violence in this country. We acknowledge that justice will come from the streets, from the nation demanding accountability and refusing to move on until Black Lives Matter in the eyes of the state. Before I introduce our fabulous interlocutors of this lunchtime, I'd like to invite you to join us for a brief moment of silence. Thank you. And now to introduce today's special guests. Yoram Roth is a lifelong entrepreneur with a focus on the creative, the real estate, and the hospitality sectors. He's the chairman of Fotografiska New York, as well as of NeueHouse, and has lived across New York, Berlin, and LA for the past 20 years. He'll be joined by architect and urban designer Mitchell Joachim, who's the co-founder of Terreform ONE, as well as an associate professor of practice at NYU and formerly an architect at the offices of Frank Gehry and I.M. He's been awarded Fulbright Scholarships, fellowships with TED, Moshe Safdie, and the MIT Martin Family Society of Sustainability. He's also published a number of books, which I'm ordering immediately, and his design work has been exhibited at MoMA and the Venice Biennale. Keeping them in conversation and in questions, we have Rail editor-at-large, Paul D. Miller, aka DJ Spooky, a composer, multimedia artist, and writer whose work immerses audiences in a blend of genres, global cultures, and environmental and social issues. Previously, before collaborating with yours truly, he's collaborated with an array of recording artists, including Metallica, Chuck D, Steve Reich, and Yoko Ono. It's also, important to mention that his 2018 album, DJ Spooky Presents Phantom Dance Hall, debuted at number 3 on Billboard Reggae. Without further ado, Paul, passing the mic on over to you.
All right, so hey everybody. First and foremost, it's a pleasure and an honor to be doing this the day after this inauguration of Joe Biden. It's been fascinating to see how we can think about the sort of notions of this sort of Trump derangement syndrome as applied to our political process. And it's been intriguing over the last several months of the pandemic to see these lectures and discussions become kind of not only focused on contemporary art as a sensibility and an aesthetic philosophy, but from the viewpoint of how we can reconfigure society after the pandemic. I'm very interested in seeing how the arts can give us a platform for reimagining the potentialities of things. So some of the speakers we've had over the last several months, Paula Crown, for example, very interesting art collector and artist, Hank Willis Thomas, Ai Weiwei. And so Yoram Roth and Mitchell, to me at least, represent some very intriguing perspectives on how do we think of architecture, the museum itself, and above all, how we look at the impact of these kinds of tensions in the urban landscape as the pandemic rages on, and how can museums offer us new, for lack of a better word, rhetorical spaces in the vocabulary of the city. So what I want to do is show you guys a couple of fun little projects that I think may be of help. I'm going to just show a couple of slides. This is one of the museums that Yoram participates in. The architect was, of course, the inestimable, I'm going to give you guys a quick guess. It's not Frank Gehry, but we'll go to the next one. And then this is the Fotografiska in Berlin. Then, oh, by the way, it's Daniel Liebeskin, just right. Giving you guys. I was just going to see if we could do survey says, kind of thing. So yeah, that's Daniel Libeskind. This is a very famous historical building in Berlin. I'll let Yoram fill you guys in on that. This is one of the other buildings in Stockholm that Yoram is heavily involved with. And of course, this is a pun I have recently about artist in isolation, artist in quarantine, artist after quarantine. So considering everyone here is involved with the creative economy, one of the things that's fascinatingly kind of been in disruption is public space, and museums represent that kind of tension between private and public dynamics. And many museums have gone into all sorts of different philosophical and aesthetic tensions with COVID. So I want to kind of riff on that with Yoram in a moment. And above all, the internet as we know it turned 50 last year. And 1969 to 2019 was the 50th anniversary of the internet. It comes from a series of hubs called ARPANET. And the first two hubs were between UCLA and Stanford Research Institute in 1969. So from there, we can see billions and billions of nodes evolving, and all of those nodes have radically transformed our sense of the agora, the public space. The internet has radically transformed how we think of moving through a museum. And in fact, many people will be looking at the audiobook of the museum excursion as they move through a physical space. They'll be hearing over Wi-Fi. They'll be looking at the Instagram feed of the museum. And studies show your average person stands in front of a painting or a physical object in a museum for less than 6 seconds. So there's a processional sensibility. And the internet has radically changed our sense of procession as we move through digital spaces as they critique physical space. So this is one of my pieces. I just do a pun here about a post-inaugural sense of humor here. And above all, I'm going to switch over to this last slide. And then we're going to pass the mic on to Yoram and to Mitchell. So this is in 1915. It's Luigi Russolo, who's a really renowned sound artist. He coined the term the Italian futurist. And these are what you call intono rumore, which means noise generators. These guys wanted to create portraits of the city in sound. And these noise generators were meant to be an acoustic portrait of the city or an invisible museum of sound. So to me, at least, what we're seeing as we move further into this pandemic situation is the tension between physical space and digital space that museums are navigating. And that's where I think Yoram, being both kind of a tri-coastal LA, New York, Berlin situation going on, he's got a great perspective on how we can rethink these issues. So Yoram, I just want to ask you, when we first met, you were talking about photographs being open late and encouraging people to kind of rethink some of the museum restrictions. And you had talked about one of your friends is one of the chief epidemiologists in Germany. Do you want to riff on that for a second and maybe give people a little bit of background of what you're up to?
I can, and I'm happy to. Hey, everybody, I'm Yoram. We've been rethinking what a museum is. And I recently published an article on Medium that I can link everybody to in the course of this talk. And it starts at its basic core with trying to think about when are you actually open? I think historically our museums have been open at a time when most people are either at work or they have stuff to do, and it feels like it's something that is reserved for going on vacation or reserved for people of leisure. And one of the things that we do at Fotografiska, and I could talk about that a little bit, but we've been open in Stockholm. We're in our 11th year. And let me do 2 minutes about Fotografiska, because I think many of you don't know what we do. We are the largest photo museum in the world. And we show every kind of photography, whether it is documentary or whether it is fashion photography or whether it is staged art, conceptual, and we work with the biggest artists and we work with the most young emerging talent. And what we do is we usually mount solo shows. We have 4 or 5 shows up and running at any given time. We have very large space. The space in Stockholm is 70,000 square feet. New York is 55,000 square feet. Tallinn is 50,000 square feet. Berlin is going to be 60,000 square feet. So we have a lot of room to show work. Now, we are neither a collecting museum nor are we a gallery. We don't buy art and we don't sell art. It's not our thing. We work directly with the artists. We pay for the shows. We help think them through. We curate them directly with the artists, which is another big deal because we really feel like the photographer usually knows how that work should be shown and how it makes sense together and what the work is that she may be proud of, or how pieces work in a sort of timeline and how they fit. But what we've always done is we always said we want to be open. So we're open from 10 in the morning until midnight. And, we have these shows up and running. So there's, it's usually 4 or 5 shows hanging, but yeah, these shows hang for like 8 to 10 weeks. But every 2 weeks, another show gets switched out. So as you come back to the museum, you're always experiencing new and different work. And out of that, we found ourselves being, very attractive to a younger crowd that wants to go out after dinner, that wants to spend time in a cultural environment with other people who are culturally curious. And we built on that. We put in a restaurant because we realized that food matters. It's not a little side thing. I mean, there are great museums, especially in New York, that have really awesome restaurants. But it feels like those restaurants just fill up as the museum closes, and they have nothing to do with each other. And it was like, wait, it should be the heart of what we do. So we have a really wonderful food concept, which is based around this idea of sustainable pleasure. We're largely a vegetarian restaurant, but there's a piece of meat or a piece of fish every day you can order on the side. So that's neither here nor there. The point is we want people to come in, we want people to spend time, and we want people to come back to spend time with us. And the next obvious step out of that was, we have this community. And so we should offer them like a membership that gives them a stake in what we do. And so we've built a large membership of people who come back, who stay in touch with us, but who also use the space for their own. So we are open to all kinds of suggestions, and it begins with often some of the more obvious stuff, courses in photography and photo and art appreciation, all the way to sound baths in the morning. That's been a huge hit. And yoga classes and sort of ad hoc daycare for the kids at 4 in the afternoon after work. It's been a really pretty marvelous idea. We've now taken that to other cities. We opened in New York, December 2019, thus forever proving I have no crystal ball on pandemics. But we'll make it work. And we opened in Tallinn, and we are opening in Berlin next year. And we have a few other things in the pipeline that I won't talk about quite now.
But Yoram, also one of the things, he's being very humble. What I've really found fascinating about Yoram is that he's an interdisciplinary person. You're also an artist, and you've also been very supportive of places like NeueHouse, which is a sort of a co-working space and an artist kind of gathering spot. Do you want to talk about some of the tangential things, or did you want to just focus? Because the museum concept, and Mitchell, this is where I want to bring you in as well. We're looking at this kind of, one of the things that Yoram really embodies is that the museum is kind of not only a social gathering space, but a place that has a dynamic sensibility between photography and as a physical embodiment, and photography as a more conceptual kind of capturing of different materials. So for example, when you go to the current installations and exhibitions at Fotografiska, in New York at least, you have all sorts of stuff around Andres Serrano, and really hyper eclectic. But
Green, Martin Schöller, we have really great shows on right now. So if anybody's in New York, go, because it's really fabulous.
Yeah, and it's a great space. I've been spending time there over the last couple of weeks. But Mitchell, do you want to jump in for a second? Because you've also done stuff with this idea of sort of the biological and sort of intersection between biotech, physical architecture, and rethinking green or resilient spaces in the city as well.
Yeah, well, super glad to be here. Thanks, Paul and Yoram. Excited to have this discussion with you, and thanks to the Brooklyn Rail. A little background from me. My mom, born and raised in Fort Greene. My kids, mostly raised in different parts of Brooklyn, specifically Park Slope. My office, or Terreform ONE, our group, is in the Brooklyn Navy Yards. So, just love the fact that anything that happens in Brooklyn, is still happening in Brooklyn. We have the largest amount of creative people in Brooklyn. 308 languages are spoken. All kinds of folks are there. And I think if anyone's going to be resilient when it comes to this pandemic, it's going to be people in Brooklyn. The work that we're doing in many cases is often shown in museums and galleries. It's commissioned to be in that sort of, view of the public. And, Terreform ONE is a nonprofit. We're a 501c3, and our job is to essentially, we do work with some private clients, is to make the environment as green as possible. Our motto is design against extinction. So we've got a serious problem here with coexistence. It's been very difficult for humans to get along with other humans, but we are doing a really terrible job when it comes to getting along with other species on this planet, to the tune of something to the effect of 60%, maybe 50%, depending on how you look at the background extinction rate of all life forms on Earth have basically become extinct since the 70s. So that's half of every bird, fish, mammal, insect, coral is gone. So our nonprofit has been working to think about that at an architectural scale. How can we make cities socio-ecological so we can consider not only relationships between neighbors and communities as far as humans are concerned, but also our relationships with the stuff of life. That's all the flora and fauna that we share environment with, and we desperately need them. And it's not an intractable problem. The solutions have been around for some time, and they come from many different angles. Certainly, the technological is one, but it does require political will. It really, and we're starting to see that finally. We've got the Green New Deal, which pretty much was born here in New York, and the Democratic Party is making that a big agenda. And I think we need to realize it's not about Democrats. It's affecting all of us. Something like COVID-19, basically kills every single one of us. Doesn't matter what your nationality is, or your race, or ethnicity, or age. If you get affected by it and it decides to take you, it will. And I think that we're realizing that we are all one kind of species. If we can realize that, we're all on one planet. And I think we need to be really logical about the strategies in place to communicate to others about the problems that we're creating. Museums are doing a pretty good job of that. And I think through the course of this discussion, we can talk about many ways museums do all kinds of outreach to get the public interested in many different topics. The one that Terreform is working on is certainly, design against extinction. And I have a few slides. I can take 2 minutes and show some of the work that we are up to. If I can just share screen real quick, so you get a sense of the kind of things that we're doing. So we've been working on Hurricane Sandy before the hurricane arrived. So we're looking at waste, food, water, energy, and air quality and mobility in New York City. Look at all different problems at all different scales to stop the extinction issue that we're facing. So our motto being design against extinction. We do various visions or renderings working with communities about what the future is of their neighborhoods to be super green. So here we got everything from vertical gardens to air quality areas to farms that are also vertical, to solar power systems on the facades of buildings, to wind turbines, to trackless trains, thinking about high throughput mobility, to riparian corridors in our streets, rethinking our sewer system and our rainwater issues, a modicum of maintenance to keep all of these things working, and thinking of streets as something that really belong to the public. We're seeing that more so thanks to COVID than ever, where we're taking over parking spots with streeteries, et cetera. So we have been thinking about this for some time. We're also working on projects like this, which are these essentially anti-extinction eggs. Inside them, they have a rare species that is a local creature that's been red listed. And what we're doing is doing everything we can to preserve it cryogenically and release it within 7 years, along with all of its habitat material. So these are seed bombs and fertile soil and everything it would want to help jumpstart its population in a local area. So the outside of that egg, the anti-extinction egg, decays over years, and then eventually inside there would be the embryos, which are released and help that population rewild those areas. We also look at counting populations of what humans are doing in cities, and a massive growth, which is expected to still be around 11 billion people on this planet by the end of the century. How does that affect how we work, how we live, and how we move? So here we used a computational system based on E. coli, where we genetically modified it to essentially map population across the Earth in the densest cities on this planet, and show people a world map based on Buckminster Fuller of what it would be like with increasing population and where most of that population would actually occur, which is actually in Asia. So we're getting 11 billion people. What are the consequences of that? We'll also look at the food issues. What are we going to eat when have so many people? Meat is expected to double the production of meat by 2050. Here we looked at this client, which is crickets. We looked at eating crickets as an alternate form of protein, not cows, pigs, chicken, or lamb, but actually insect-based protein. 80% of the planet eats it, just not Europe and the United States. I know most people in Brooklyn don't want to eat bugs, but you do. They're called contaminants in your food every single day. But actually, we're thinking about making essentially a protein-based flour from crickets, where they're produced in these systems here. It's called the cricket shelter and farm, and therefore human consumption. It's ground into a flour and produced into bagels, pasta, bonbons, all kinds of interesting food products, including food that's kosher. Here we have these little pods here, cricket sex pods. We encourage them to spread their genetics across the farm. They're harvested every 6 weeks, where they die naturally of old age, and then they're milled into a flour. We treat them like sentient beings. Other things we're doing is looking at here, these are farm pods that are produced for your home. So they can grow spirulina, wheatgrass, all kinds of, we also do cellular agronomy. It's got 9 columns of sub-irrigation where you grow your food on the sphere. So instead of a green wall, it's a green ball. You can grow food on the inside and the outside. You can have it in an urban park or on a balcony or inside your apartment. You can also occupy it. So it's part cabin / furniture / farm. So it's a kind of a quite an interesting remix of programs, all of it within the shape of a ball. And also looking at new ways of using super green technologies, in this case, biotech, to make furniture in homes. So this, we're combining mycelium, which is mushrooms, coating them with Acetobacter, and making chairs that you can eat. So there's a chair for my daughter when she was in kindergarten, which is completely edible. It's essentially a mushroom. Mycelium can be used for packaging systems, acoustic tiles. There's a ton of things to do it. Ecovative's a company that has that, but we've been growing furniture for some time. When we're done with these chairs, which is fused plywood and mycelium, you don't throw them in a landfill like you do your IKEA furniture. These chairs you throw into a garden, and it feeds thousands of other forms of life. We're also working on housing that fits directly into the landscape. So here are homes made from pleaching or grafting inosculate matter to form one contiguous vascular system, growing homes out of different woody plants and attaching them to old growth trees on sites. We do this with computer scaffolding that shapes the geometry of the plants. It's something like this. There's a home called Home Alive. The structure is alive or made of plywood. It grows for 150 years plus, and then you replace some of the vines as they start to die off or get too big over time. So here we're doing this in a place in upstate New York near Storm King. And then two other projects. One, we're looking at mealworms as dealing with waste in cities. Styrofoam is a big problem in New York. I don't know if you guys remember, but Bloomberg started getting rid of styrofoam in school cafeterias and every place else. It's really hard to deal with it. Can't recycle it. It's a terrible material. It's certainly difficult for the earth to deal with, but these guys, mealworms, will consume it naturally. They actually eat it. They produce frass, and then they eat their own frass, and then the styrofoam completely disappears and turns into compostable material. So we produced this project for Camden, New Jersey, which is a community that has a really difficult problem with urban waste, junk space, and dumping. Here we produce this monument for folks to climb up there and dump their styrofoam waste in a sort of ceremonious-like way, and then watch the mealworms devour it, which is kind of a lot of fun. Obviously, this one's meant to be spectacle. There's a practical digester that could be implemented. First, we got to communicate to the public that your waste can be devoured naturally. And the last thing I'll show real quick is this Monarch Sanctuary. So this is about butterflies that are native to New York. They're Brooklyn and Manhattan-based butterflies. The monarchs are beautiful, and they're disappearing. We lost 90 million of these guys in the last few years. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services is saying that we're going to probably see monarchs become extinct within 10 years or so. They're red listed. Work with the Museum of Natural History to think about butterfly sanctuaries and also butterfly feeders. You can see it in the exhibits that are there now. So work directly with that museum, bringing live organisms into their space. And then building inside the skin of buildings, what we call a Biotope Mosaic, or a modular system that you could purchase that just attaches to your building, that allows you to have some organism share that building with you. So it goes on the outside, it's a double skin system, and you allow, in this case, monarch butterflies to live inside your building space and to flourish. They get to repopulate. There's areas for them to eat, to drink, to sleep, areas for respite, even mud baths. We did this installation at the Cooper Hewitt, the Smithsonian, where we installed a fully working Monarch Shelter, a sanctuary system, to show folks that actually architecture and urban environments can be a great place for something as beautiful as these butterflies. So that's just some of the things that we've been up to, and I'll just sort of stop sharing there. I look forward to having a conversation about all these different possibilities.
All right, cool. Now, Mitchell, one of the things that connects you and Yoram is that on one hand, Yoram is heavily involved with physical spaces, serious real estate investments, and he's an artist. And by the way, Yoram used to own a cool record label as well out of Berlin.
I did. I used to own a record label, but I recently made an art series that was entirely parametric in nature. So when I look at the architecture that you're putting together, I just have a mad crush. I had to learn how to use Grasshopper in order to like develop all this design, and I had a really hard time getting my head around it, but I got it made. But yeah, we have historically backed into really old landmark buildings, which has taken away the opportunity to be a little bit more sensitive to the environment around us. But props given, brother. That is some really great stuff.
Yeah, so let's pivot for a second back to the world of physical space and museums, and especially Yoram, because your museum doesn't collect. There's a really long tradition of museum comes from the ancient Greek term museon, which means seat of the muse. And amusingly enough, when muse, and if you go back to ancient Greece, the idea here is that there's a kind of an impermanence to how people think of what a museum is on one hand, but then you have the physical embodiment of the buildings. And ancient Greece, on up to the Renaissance, if you think about the first major museums, of course, were the Medici collections that determined how people would come together as a display of power to show what was in their collection. Then if you go up to the Hermitage in Russia, which is also considered sort of a prototype for the modern museum, your museum is not competing with physical space, but against Instagram. And I really think if you want to just riff for a second, let me just show everybody what this looks like. So this is Yoram's building, it's on 23rd and Park Avenue. It's an amazing building. The architect was, this is from, if I remember correctly, there's a lot of issues around the history of the building as well.
Well, it's 22nd and Park. It's on the south east corner there by Gramercy. Look, it was an old Christian insurance company, I guess, and the building was laying fallow for many years. I mean, it was really boarded up. It's owned by a big real estate guy in New York called A.B. Rosen, who really understands art, and so we were able to get into a conversation based on that. We redid the whole building, the outside, the lighting of it, and large chunks of the inside with Cetra Ruddy. We're a very, very cool architecture firm. Mm-hmm. And then there's a restaurant on those big windows there on the second floor. That's our restaurant because, like I said, we believe in food there. Because it's New York City, we had an opportunity to do something really cool. We did that with a well-known restaurant architect group called Roman and Williams. So it looks a little bit more like the building. It's an 1880s building. I mean, there's a lot of nooks and crannies for monarchs. Not by design. But it's a magic building, and I'm very proud. It took us several years to get it back up and running. But I mean, the way that I think we think about space, I think with all deference to the architects listening in, I think especially the museum world, and I'll come back to, what Daniel Libeskind with the Jewish Museum, and frankly, we're working in Berlin with Herzog and de Meuron, who are also doing major museums.
Okay.
They are our modern day cathedrals.
And by the way,
and so when you come in, the experience is supposed to be wow, and the experience is supposed to be one of a certain, maybe even subconscious intimidation. This idea is that this, whatever is about to happen in here, is bigger and more important than you. That you are there to marvel at what is there, and you are small, and maybe if you're cool or educated in a particular language set, you're one of the people who understands what's going on in here. But other than that, come and talk in hushed tones, get out, stop by the gift shop. But other than that, you know, and it doesn't feel like it's yours. And the question is, how do we, so we're doing two things now, right? And by we, I don't mean the team that I'm working with at Fotografiska NeueHouse and the other companies that I get to be involved with, but it's a question of who are we in the modern museum landscape? Whether we're talking about the people who are building Super Blue from Pace, or the people who are doing Art Tech House, who are doing, you know, working with artists like Refik Anadol about projections and so on. When you come into this space, when you enter a space, what do you do there and why are you there? And what is the definition of this art? Does it have to be a piece, a sculpture, a painting on the wall? Or can it be an experience? Can the whole thing be an experience, you know? And so when I look at companies like Team Lab, like Art Tech House, like Atelier de Lumière, this idea that you come in and you experience these projections, these physical spaces. There's a very well-known artist here in Berlin called Sisso Tolas, who's working on the hard edge of scent design. I mean, she designs scent. She's done entire exhibitions around the scent of fear, with soldiers coming back after missions in Iraq and Afghanistan, and where she's recording their scent and pasting that on walls. How do we redefine that? How do we create a space that doesn't make you feel small? And, you know I sound like an American, but I'm born and raised in Berlin. I went to the American school, so I got the accent and the vocabulary. They taught us both kinds of English, Brooklyn and Queens. That was always our riff there. If I, as a Berliner, we had a lot of socialist architecture where, again, the goal of the socialist architecture was to make the individual less important than the state. It was supposed to intimidate. It was supposed to give you no corner where to assemble in smaller private groups. And so when I look at work like Mitch, who offers all these nooks and crannies on a monarch butterfly level, but also on a human level, where you can come into a space and have a corner for yourself and then go out and explore that is where we need to go.
So, I mean, that's where there's some beautiful kind of convergent situations going on. Because to me, a museum, in what you're doing, Yoram and Mitchell is definitely in the process of rethinking sustainable practices in physical spaces in a way that is both practical and scalable. And I know you have, Yoram, you have a philosophy of sustainability for your museums, and that's a central theme for Fotografiska as well. Mitchell, do you want to kind of riff on some of the museum concepts because I know, say for example, if you go to Svalbard, I've been to Svalbard, it's one of the most northern islands in the world, and they have this, what you call the seed bank. And it's kind of like where you put all the seeds that are being taken. Regretfully, many species, as Mitchell was saying, are going toward the verge of extinction. So Svalbard is where they've created a museum of seeds. It's pretty cool. And then it flooded recently, by the way, because all the glaciers are melting. So there's always these kind of like paradoxes about, sustainability and durability and scalability. Mitchell, do you want to riff on that for a moment? Because you've by the way, this is his most recent book, I believe, right? Design with Life. Is this the recent one or the second to recent one?
The recent one. That's
okay.
The work of Terreform for the last 14, 15 years. 400 people have worked with us over that time at our nonprofit. And a lot of the comments that I'm seeing, I can't really answer them right now, but you can find that information in there. The idea of museum, and I think what we're seeing here now, it's always changing. Certainly, museum curators, boards. I'm thinking, they're very, they're really smart people, and they certainly care a lot about culture. And I think as much as possible, they're interested in engaging the public, and there's still radical ideas that have yet to happen in museums, and may be difficult to unpack, because I'm realistic about the kind of the protocols and the kind of the budgets and everything else that gets involved when one is certainly dealing with a major museum. I think though, some of our experiences, we've been trying very hard to deal with live organisms in museums. That seems to be a big part of bioart or certainly environmental art, whether it's plants or some kind of creature. And that's hard to do because museums aren't zoos. The Museum of Natural History in New York has a small kind of butterfly exhibit, but that's about all they can do. And it's more sort of, lots of dead things and a lot of taxidermy. And so, which is still okay. And there's issues with zoos and the crossover between that. I think I would love to see something like public programs that actually pay people to go to museums. That might be crazy, and I'm channeling my inner Bernie Sanders, but this is the idea that some people just don't have time. They're firemen or teachers, or well, hopefully teachers are going to museums, but they just have a day-to-day job and they're not getting a chance to go. Well, we should allow, maybe in like an Andrew Yang-like way, a moment in their schedules where they're paid through through their job or through the government or through some sort of compensation, where they actually have free time to go and visit any museum and check it out.
Although I would argue with you, just to jump in for a second, I mean, I think that's, so 2 points there. I mean, I think museums should offer, as we do in Europe, certain discounts to, various participants in the economy. Certainly old age pensioners, kids, students get substantial discounts. We can certainly extend those to government employees, but more importantly, I think the museum should be open at times when people actually have time.
Yeah, that's true. But it's also the incentive to get them to get certain people. I don't know what number of the population doesn't really visit museums anymore after you graduate high school. I imagine there's a massive drop off of people that just are not interested anymore.
And just to buzzword myself for a second, this is why I wrote in that article. I think what we in the arts industry and those of us working in museums especially need to understand is there is sometimes we get a little bit of concern from some of the more traditional museum industry that feels like we are somehow a threat to them. And I always try and explain to them and say, guys, we are not the threat, man. We are competing with Netflix and with TikTok and with the Xbox. We got to get people off the couch.
Yes, preaching to the choir on that one. That's exactly it. And if not for themselves, for their kids.
Right, but there's also going to be a lot of innovation about what constitutes visible and occupiable space. So with photography, a lot of people are migrating to what you call VR, AR, XR, which XR just means extended reality. AR means, there's a lot of different ways that we can rethink. Like I go to Japan a lot, or if you go to China, a lot of artists are actually making their own museums in China, especially, where they have huge budgets, serious high-tech stuff going on. And if you go to Japan, for example, Team Lab is one of my favorite groups right now. And they just did a great thing at Super Blue in Miami that Pace Gallery's been doing. So
they haven't opened yet. They're going to open in a few months. But listen, Team Lab in their, they have multiple locations, but in their Japan location, in their Tokyo, it was just outside of Tokyo, but Tokyo's huge, whatever. They had over 2 million visitors in a year. That makes them the 4th largest museum in the world. And it's incredible. It's magical. And so they are very much, I think, somebody we all applaud and look up to and look to help us sort of form this as we move forward. Go.
Right. And you guys are both, I think the reason I keep trying to make sure that there's a connection or a linkage between what Mitchell's talking about with his concepts and the way museums are evolving right now because of the tensions of the digital economy. And again, your average person stands in front of a painting at a museum less than 6 seconds, but it will engage a website or a web page for minutes at a time. And of course, this has kind of grown exponentially as we've pivoted to more of a digital attention economy. And this is one thing that TikTok sort of used to revolutionize viewing, because they switched from the Western model, which is Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. They're all based on what you call the attention economy model, which is what you call the social graph, how many clicks and likes you get. Whereas TikTok is using what they call the attention graph. And what they've done is revolutionize how quickly you click on or click through a video, and then use that to generate, obviously, a huge amount of attention. So how you monetize that, how you rethink that. One of my favorite theoreticians is André Malraux, and he coined the term la musée imaginaire, or the museum without walls. And I think, let me just show one other quick photograph, because I think what Mitchell was pitch perfect on, and Yoram, this is kind of throwing the ball to you here, is when you repurpose older buildings, So for example, what you're doing in Berlin, I remember this is a historical spot. And just
well, for those of you who know Berlin, this is probably one of the most culturally important buildings in Berlin. This is the old Tacheles, which was actually a department store built in 1912, something like that. And then immediately went sideways, turned into all kinds of nefarious buildings under the Nazis, got completely bombed as everything else in Mitte did, and then stood fallow. I mean, literally was a ruin. And then in 1990, a couple of weeks after the wall fell, it was squatted by a bunch of people. It became an artist collective. Then it became more of a, whatever. It was a great place. It's completely covered inside with graffiti. Some of the biggest street art names in the world have worked there. A lot of it is just craziness. This is a very sterile rendering of what's actually going to happen. But yes, we are repurposing that building in a way where we show various pieces of history. The bullet holes in the front obviously stay. The street art, the spray paint that's everywhere inside will all stay. It's all part of the landmarking. But then we also have spaces that are about photography and that are about the programming that we do for the community.
Yep. So it's kind of funny. I love being corrected because my memory, I have to deal with so many different things. I love the fact that Yoram is like, it's 22nd Street, not 23rd.
Sorry.
It's all good. I have to, those small granular details, man.
How to drive traffic, brother.
Right. But in the audience, we have several curators and really fascinating folks. There's Limor Tomer from the Met. There's Corinne Ernie from the Parish Museum in the Hamptons that was designed by Herzog de Meuron. Obviously, the Met is an icon and a flagship, especially with the architecture and its relationship to Central Park. So there's plenty of people in the audience who I think once we open up to questions, one last provocation I want to put to both Mitchell and to Yoram is that obviously with the pandemic, again, there's been a serious tension with how restrictions on COVID have applied to physical space. And it's raging, increasing. There's all sorts of numbers and statistics that show of course, an airborne virus, but now some museums are pivoting to putting in these crazy LED lights that kill the virus in the air. And there's also antibacterial carpets they can put in so that when you walk on anything, there's kind of different antibacterial technologies that are changing the physical space so that the virus alone cannot really, if you go to anywhere now, they're all wiping everything and everything is like this sterility. But at the same time, the virus is still going on and its numbers exponentially increasing every couple of days. So do you guys have any thoughts on the near future of response? Because the 1918 pandemic radically changed how we thought about architecture. For example, the modern bathroom was switched all colors to white to indicate sterility. Hospitals had to reconfigure because of the airborne process and this air circulation. Mitchell, you probably have had all sorts of issues around pollen, for example, and the way pollen moves. These are just provocation, and I'm gonna let
Mitch go with this, but to me, it's like we're gonna do whatever is required of us. But honestly, it's like that stupid ass shoe bomber. We've been taking off our shoes at the airport for 20 years because one guy tried to schlep a bomb on a friggin' airplane. And so, we're gonna have some kind of ritual in public assembly spaces based on how we circulate air, what we have to do, and what we can do. And I think we'll see. But that one, I'm gonna rely on leadership to guide us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say that there is no doubt that museums are here to stay. They will evolve, they will adapt if they need to. There's exciting people usually behind them. Certainly the work that Yoram's doing it's a great example. I think they represent the height of human culture in many ways and our civilization, and they often try and reflect that, and they do a job as best they can to make a difference, certainly in how we educate our public, whether it's a museum for tolerance or something about memory and memorialization. Something like the Holocaust is, I think one, kind of representation of where a museum is doing that work and keeping us in alignment with what happened in history, to museums that, have actually, changed my life. I want to there's another colleague at NYU, Eric Kleinenberg, who runs IPK, actually talks about big institutions and how important they are to the structure of our society. And he says things like, for instance, the public library is something you could not invent today. And this is something that is so crucial to keeping New York, keeping cities, keeping people just educated and connected. Libraries have just morphed over time, but they are just a stable part of how we organize ourselves and how we learn from one another. Museums are hand in hand with that kind of programming. These are essential programs that actually make us human. I can't stress how important they were. As a kid growing up, my dad would take me to museums, schools, trips. They changed my life. Even as an adult, I went to the Paris Museum fairly recently. It was like 5 years ago with another colleague, Peter Anker. And we went to the top floor of the Museum of Natural History, which was pitch black with no signs. It had no designation of what was up there. And these giant doors that we opened up, we walked into a room that was just super dark with exhibits that had barely any lighting. We weren't even sure if it was an exhibition space. It turned out that it was the entire top floor was devoted to creatures that we have lost, from the dodo bird to saber-toothed tigers to more recent animals, carrier pigeons, pretty much everything. And when I realized the enormous weight of things that were gone, it absolutely changed my direction from being someone that worked in the environment to someone that really wants to work to stop this madness. And it also had the center of that space was a clock, and we would ring periodically. It was actually every 7 minutes. It was a clock to Marie Antoinette. And every 7 minutes designated within that museum, another creature disappearing on this planet. It was an absolutely impactful exhibit that changed my thinking, got me even more radical in how I want to work. And it's something that I didn't think, as you get older, it gets harder to like really to shift gears and do something else. But it was because of a museum and exhibitions like that and the people behind them, those powerful thinkers, that actually changed my, hearts and minds, and mine is included. So I just would like to say I think that they are absolutely essential.
Yeah, and just one, by way of kind of talking both to Yoram's repurposing of that historical building and the way the Nazis and all sorts of stuff are happening, on over to what Daniel Libeskind did with the Jewish Museum of Berlin. I mean, when you look at the Met, and this is maybe throwing a small micro provocation to Lee Martomer, who's in the audience. Thanks for joining us. Frederick Law Olmsted was generally considered to be the architect of Central Park. There's always been a political and economic tension with how people look at the urban landscape, who can build, what gets, like there was a Black Village, for example, that Central Park demolished to create Central Park. And Frederick Law Olmsted was responding to the Hudson School of Painters, for example. And one of the other current repurposings of museums is Dillard, Scofidio, and Rinfo redid the Museum of Modern Art recently. SOM's Monahan Terminal at the train station. So we're seeing a lot of this kind of innovation and rethinking how museums and these more proscenium and public spaces can evolve. But there's still that lingering anxiety of the pandemic. And I know we're on a little bit of a tight time frame here. Malvika and my fellow people at the Brooklyn Rail, are you guys the timekeepers? Because I'm terrible at keeping the time. If you just let me know, just do a little signal.
You have about maybe 10 more minutes.
Okay, and then we open up to questions, right? Or
Perfect.
do we? Okay, so 10 more minutes of back and forth between the three of us, then we're going to open up to questions. So I see some great people in the audience. So yeah, I mean, Yoram, one of the things about I want to make sure that we make sure to talk about the Jewish Museum as well, because that's a powerful statement about the history and legacy. You're obviously German Jewish, and that's something that has a tremendous amount of, history going. I'd love to hear a little bit of your thoughts on those kind of tensions as well, because obviously Germany and Israel and the legacy of art, appropriation. I mean, did you hear
17 other panels? I mean, that's the whole thing.
Okay.
Look, I mean, I was when we did that museum, I was a much younger person. I mean, that was 25 years ago when we kicked that off. I think what was really incredible, people tend to look at that building, but what they're missing is that there was actually another major old museum that was 150 years old right next to it. And you actually enter into that and then go underground and then slowly come up. So people like to look at that Daniel Libeskind building, and they forget, though, that the thought process that he had behind it was that you actually enter through this old, very quintessential German-Prussian building. So it's that interplay between the two. It is not just this modern thing. It's this old thing that he did there as well. Okay. Look, the Jewish Museum has a very specific mission. All right, and the Jewish Museum, yes, it came with incredible architecture. Again, that in this particular case, used parts of his architecture, especially to communicate that hopelessness. As you get through that exhibit, you get to a point where you find yourself in a shaft that there's no way out. But what that museum specifically was it's called the Jewish Museum in Berlin, and it talks about the Jewish history in Germany. There were Jews in Germany. The earliest record was from 232 AD, when the Roman council in Cologne agreed to let Jews be part of the city council. And the way that we practice Judaism nowadays, and I put a lot of quotations mark around that because I'm not that practicing, was largely defined during the Middle Ages along the Rhine, in Speyer and Worms and in Mainz as the main cities of Judaism, the way that we practice it in the diaspora.
Okay. So, I mean, to me, what's powerful about that is a museum as a series of recollections and the legacy of World War II and all of these tensions. You know, we were talking the other day, I actually visited this place called Rua Traghetto in Venice. Yeah. And it's where the Doge of Venice let Jews who were fleeing the Spanish Inquisition, they put them all on one island in Venice, and that was the ghetto. That's considered the quote-unquote first ghetto.
That is actually where the word comes from. It's called the ghetto.
Yeah, well, I'm a New Yorker, so my pronunciation is not the greatest. Right. But yeah, so these kinds of like limited urban spaces, compression. I mean, I'm using Muslim architecture and Muslim aesthetics was highly influenced by the Sephardim diaspora that fled and ended up in Turkey and ended up in all these. You know, so these are all things of legacy of diaspora.
Yeah, 1492 has a whole different thing for us. We were expelled from Spain. Mm-hmm. But Venice was a great place to stop, and still is. But everybody went into Turkey, and then from there into Iraq, effectively. Mm-hmm.
So these kind of like things that linger over the modern conversation, and that's where the sort of celebration of complexity, the celebration of interdisciplinarity, and the celebration of hyperconnectivity across global and nation-state fault lines. I'm a big fan of this idea of the hyperconnected diaspora. So with that said and done, I think just last provocation, and we're going to open up to audiences. What in your backdrop, I mean, Mitchell, maybe you want to begin with this and then pass it over to Yoram. Where are you guys thinking about the next 5 to 10 years for museums? Because I really think that we're going to be seeing tremendous amount of technologies transforming physical space. Like I said earlier, André Malraux was the first to say the museum without walls, musée imaginaire. And if so, what are you guys kind of looking at for the digital versus the physical? Just putting that out there, just to see if you have any responses or any first impressions.
Yeah, well, I mean that the tension between the digital and physical has been going on since the 90s. So you know, it's probably still going to continue for another 30 plus years. Especially as it gets more sophisticated. We have quantum computation and more of these technologies become accessible, readily available in your phone or some other version of whatever it is that you use to navigate the world. So, you know, museums have adapted. In many cases, they've been add-ons, not necessarily an entire, routine or program that's been completely transformed by technology. Maybe there's one or two museums that have done just that and only that. There are examples. As far as the everyday museum, I think it's going to be a lot slower because the physical space itself, nothing as we can, I mean, this very moment is a good example. Nothing really replaces in-person connections. I would love to be there and hang out with you guys and see everyone there and get a chance to talk afterwards and shake hands and get something to drink and eat. So museums provide that space, and that is essential. I think it's absolutely vital. And I think that no matter what we get from the digital realm, the physical part may be enhanced, but it's not just going to disappear. And I'm not a Luddite. I totally support any kind of technology that would drive or get people there, especially what we've seen with Google, these super high resolution scans of, the Mona Lisa or what have you. So you don't even have to go to the Louvre. You just kind of review it on your computer. But honestly, nothing replaces it when you go and see it in person. And it's the entire experience being around other people and in those spaces that makes all the difference. And that's not possible to change. It's a sense of immediacy and connection that museums provide and will always provide as long as we're corporal beings. So I think I'm for it, but it's still not going to totally replace physical spaces. And just to mention, I mean, Yoram was right about everything about what was happening with the Jewish Museum. That old building was devoted to German history. So what Libeskind had done is create this kind of a chasm in German history to talk about the history of the Jews in relationship to Germany, which made it such a powerful space to be in. And I think if we look here at what's happening with 9/11, I mean, all New Yorkers can relate. It's both a memorial and a museum. And we absolutely needed that. People cried out for it. We still use it. It's a part of our remembrance, our history, and a kind of an archive of those moments. And it is also incredibly important.
Yeah, and I don't think I've got a lot to add on top of that. I mean, I actually believe that most museums are awesome the way they are. And I think there is something about going and experiencing what's there. I think there's a lot of gimmicky stuff that's going on right now. With all deference, I don't know who's in the room, but if I do look at some of the things coming from Atelier de Lumière in Paris or so, where they're doing like moving projections of Van Gogh paintings, it's kind of fun if you're baked, but it's not exactly a high art experience, So, but I think there is what's happening with new artists doing new work in an experiential way, and I very much look forward to adding that to the cultural experience. And I think there are people doing great work with that, and I think the museum, the traditional museum people need not look at it as a competition. I think where we can have some fun is really now that we have these incredible smartphones, instead of small little signs that tell us what the work is, to be able to hold up the phone and scan the thing and get more depth information that is well produced, that makes it more accessible, that makes it more compelling. If we're going to compete with TikTok, we got to give people a quasi TikTok experience. That's where all the versions of XR make sense.
Okay, so with that as a final statement, I know just to respect the time, it's now 2 o'clock. Malvika, do you want to moderate any questions? And if people, these are two brilliant minds. I would love to hear your questions. Keep it polite and respectful. Don't go crazy or anything. Or if you do go crazy, at least make it interesting.
Thank you so much.
So yeah.
Yeah, good advice. Behave in the chat. Our first question will come from Alexander Paulier, who, one moment, let's see. Okay, you should be able to turn on your microphone now.
Oh, hi, okay. This
Alexandra Paulier, sorry.
This is for Yoram. Yeah, I mean, going along with that, what you were just saying about gimmicky things that museums are doing, I was curious to know if there's anything that Fotografiska was attempting to kind of pull people in during this COVID time. I actually work right across the street on 21st and Park. And so it was in December, a favorite hotspot for me for dinner and drinks. So hoping that comes back soon. But just wondering kind of how have you managed over the last year to kind of keep the interest going and anything?
So we did a number of things. I mean, I think, so thank you. And yes, we will be back. We will be back fully. It's going to be unbelievable. It's going to be Fat City. But in the meantime, we are open. We do keep all the safe space. We keep the distances and we wash our hands, and it's still compelling work. And I hope you can come and see, because it has been a crazy year. And one of the things that we've been able to do as a young museum is completely adjust our exhibition program to reflect the times that we had. So when COVID broke, we pretty much immediately opened up our platform to sort of a community photography program, and we did isolation photography and things like that. After George Floyd, obviously we had a different task. So we made our platform available for people who were documenting the protests, who were shooting. We wanted to be, to the best that we could, a sort of a journalistic platform. We did open up our lobby during the protests. Everybody up and down the block was boarded up. You live there, you know it. Everybody was boarded up. We made our lobby available for cold water, for recharging phones and cameras, and to use some decent restrooms. So very happy that we were able to do that. And I know a lot of museums were not able to do that because it's not easy to make a choice like that. So we were able to make a quicker entrepreneurial thing like that. Having said all of that, and we did also mount some real formal exhibitions online in which we worked with the Jim Hedges Foundation and showed two particular series of Andy Warhol Polaroids. Having said that, I think the one art form that I kind of want to protect from the quotidian screen is photography, because we encounter so much photography, whether it's, you know, ads or news programming or friends' images on social media or whatever porn is consumed. To put photographic art into that frame makes it smaller. It takes it away. I could see how encountering a painting or a sculpture within that platform has a moment of magic. But I think with photography, we have to be careful.
And don't forget, you guys are literally the world's largest collection, or not collection, sorry, museum of photography.
Yes.
ICP, for example, has a different philosophy and a different approach. And I think what Alexander was talking about, I've been hanging out at your museum, and I love the fact that there's not that many people, and you get this very quiet, relaxed moment of contemplation and peace, which personally we could all use. By the way, I still want to just say, I am so glad Trump is gone. Oh my God. Yeah, this is like.
and one of the things, one comment, we plan on, so we're going to open a whole new program by the end of March. We're changing things out. We are taking the downtime to change a couple of things physically at the building. But come and see the work that's up now. Come and see this incredible Andres Serrano show that he did, which is very much about communicating racism in its modern context now. Come and see what Martin Schöller did about these people that were on death row for 5, 10, 15, 18 years, these interviews that he did with them. Come see what Naima Green documented. Come see what we do, but when we reopen in March, it's going to be slightly lighter material, because I think we're all in the mood for it now.
Mm-hmm. All right, so Malvika, any other questions, or people want to riff a little?
So our next question will come from Serena Caffrey, who will be joining us from the great outdoors. Serena, you can turn on your microphone now.
Hi, thank you all so much for this conversation. I wanted to ask, there's an incredible organization here in Los Angeles called Monument Lab, who's been in collaboration with the Goethe Institute in Berlin. And of course, here in the so-called US, there's been a lot of action in this past year around the toppling and recontextualizing, reimagining of public monuments, and the way that we approach monuments as a space for public memory. So I'm curious if your projects in Berlin, in particular with the appropriation of this building, if you're in conversation or collaboration at all with the work of the Goethe Institute, and if you can speak at all to their ethos and how it may or may not overlap with your projects.
So I don't know anybody at the Goethe Institute. Of course, the Goethe Institute in Germany is a thing that we all know and respect. I'll give you a big picture comment. I know I sound like an American, but I'll tell you what we did in Germany. All our monuments remain standing, almost all of them, for better or for worse. And you know, we moved Stalin's head to a different part of town because he was right in a roundabout. But other than that, everybody, Marx and Engels and so on, the Nazis never got around to putting up major monuments. But everything has been sort of moved around town, but we have them all. America is going through a thing that it needs to go through. I think I'm going to talk very big picture, and then I'm going to try and take my foot out of this bucket. But I just think that the one thing the Germans did is the minute everything was done, they looked each other in the face and said, we fucked up, and we will tell each other we fucked up for the next endless time, and acknowledge the Holocaust and acknowledge the atrocities. And it's a conversation America very much needs to have.
Totally.
Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, our next question will come from Itchy-O. I identify with that sentiment. And Itchy, you can turn on your microphone now.
Hi, I wasn't sure that I was going to ask a question, but I do have a question. Itch.io is based out of Denver. We're in immersive production. We are looking at creating a community center based in sound spiritualism. And so my ears pricked up around artists starting their own museums, and wondering if you know of any resources or have any advice for artists that are starting their own community center / museums?
I know many. I mean, often it's this is where it always gets very uncomfortable, but honestly, it's very much driven by the compelling nature of the work. I mean, at some point, you want to create something that people want to come and see. I mean, I think of Ilana Gur is a well-known artist in Israel. She has this incredible, wonderful space in Jaffa. And people can go there and it's her work, but it's also where she lives. It's this insight into this mind. And it's a living space. Sometimes she's there, she'll walk through, she's on the way to the kitchen to get a cup of coffee. It's a huge space, a little dusty. Then you look at Team Lab, who is a group of 200 plus people who work really at an incredible edge of technology to create near spiritual moments. So I think the onus is on you.
Actually, hold on. I wanted to show you guys really quick. And I believe that's Mark Moffett out of Denver, Colorado. I spent quite a bit of time in Denver. Daniel Liebskin also built the museum there, and David Adjaye built one of the other major museums there. So just architects there. I just want to show you guys. This is a new project that a friend of mine, I introduced Yoram to her. Leila Guran just bought the former power station of New York City. And right now this building, it's 3 times the size of the Tate Modern. And it's totally empty and there's crazy graffiti and stuff going. What they're going to do is turn this into an ecological museum it's going to be kind of a museum of climate change. And they're in the middle of getting everything ready. It's going to be all about green initiatives. It's just 20 minutes up the West Side Highway in Yonkers. So if you go straight up the highway, you might see this. It's kind of hidden, but if you take any of the trains in, you'll see this huge mega factory. And they're turning this into this crazy community-based and eco kind of initiative. There's also another group called Meow Wolf that's doing great work as well. I go to their New Year's Eve parties. They have amazing parties.
It's incredible and it's a wonderful experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So they've opened a new space in Denver as well, and they're friends of mine. What's that guy? Vince Galoubek is the founder. And Mark, I'd be happy to put you in touch with them. They're friends of mine. They're doing great work.
And my understanding actually is that they now have beyond Meow Wolf have now taken that skill set and are offering it as consulting to places that want to create their own spaces along that line, experiential spaces. And Meow Wolf very much enables artists. Mm-hmm. We are very much focused on photography. They work sculptural, they work on projections, they really do great stuff.
They are killing it, man. I mean, Vince Galoubek, the founder, there's a really good documentary on them on Netflix as well. And Yoram, I'd love to introduce you to them too. They're friends of mine. I think that would be a wild conversation, perhaps to be in the future, like, because they're dealing with immersive reality kind of. I don't know if you ever see.
I have found LinkedIn to be a wonderful platform, and I've been in touch with him on a couple of things there.
Okay.
Anyone else? Yeah. Do we lose Mitch? Is Mitch with us?
Yeah. Oh, he's here.
Oh, good. Hi.
Mitch is here. I love that this came full circle because the question that we had written down from the participant known as Ichio, whose actual name I've now dropped, but the original question we had written down had to do with, like, would love to hear both of you speak on thoughts on or about Meow Wolf. So I love that it sort of came all the way around.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say that Meow Wolf and other groups, Bruce High Quality, which I think is sort of changed over, but there's been this a recent shift in how artists organize themselves. And I think that is crucial, especially if you want to do something like have your own museum or start your own museum. And it's recognizing that there is a business world and that you can have a kind of a position and a say, understanding, contractual obligations, insurance, getting your schedule and scope met. That's when artists collaborate and they get smart about integrating with other communities instead of just sort of collaborating and being fully creative like Meow Wolf and others. You have a tremendous amount of power. So you can take that creativity and channel it almost anywhere. So these, well, they're called art firms, I guess is the kind of the term is it's great. Architects have sort of been doing that for a very long time anyway, but we're mostly in the building universe. But to see artists do it, I think that's fascinating. So when artists can collaborate, team up, work together, and have the ability to speak the language of business, real estate, etc., I think you can get major things accomplished.
I love that. Thank you so much. Our next question will come from our very own Alissa Quart, Poet Laureate of this lunchtime. Alyssa?
Oh yeah, hi. So I just was wondering, given, obviously I run a nonprofit called the Economic Hardship Reporting Project, and given the economic downturn, I was wondering, I mean, what do you guys think about the use of museum structures for social services? For instance, like Queen's Museum, there was a moment when Laura Rakovich was using, as a public library, I don't know if that's still true, within the museum walls. And obviously, people are voting at BAM and so forth. But I'm just wondering, like, is that part of what you see in the future of museums, especially if we're in a state of like economic collapse for the next 5 years?
I'm a little bit more upbeat than that. I think we'll be all right.
Well, obviously,
let it be 5 years.
Businesses are doing great. Like the stock market's great, but I mean, for ordinary people who might be visiting.
No, I get. Yeah, no, the stock market is not a reflection of anything other than the stock market. I think museums should. I mean, I think whether they're publicly funded or whether they're just engaged with the public. I mean, I think it's the nature of what it is. To make yourself available as a place to vote is awesome. To make yourself available as a place to get inoculated is great. In Berlin, we have a lot of, look, I'm a club kid, man. We came up through the club culture, so the Kit Kat Club is now a testing place, and it's going to become an inoculation place. I mean, the old joke in Berlin is the Kit Kat Club is a place where you go catch a disease, not go get inoculated against one. I think everybody should pitch in.
Yeah, I totally agree with pretty much every sentiment you just expressed, Yoram. And for social services, especially in a time like this, why not? I mean, if it did get worse, the pandemic, and we never know if that's the case, why not use the MoMA as a massive hospital to help people? I mean, what else is it going to be doing when everyone is in trouble? So I think they could offer their services. They don't have to, but they certainly could. And
the building in Berlin, the Tacheles wasn't called the Tacheles then, but it was a flu hospital in 1919, 1920. Yeah. So we use the buildings as we can.
Yeah.
Can I pop one in? Somebody in the comments, because I'm reading the comments with my glasses like this, which is why I'm here. Corinne Arnie asks that she's curious about the view of curators. Look, we need curators. I come from the club world. Dance music is awesome, but it's best when you have a DJ mixing it together and providing you with a great experience. That is a curated experience, all right? Curators matter. They tell the story, they help us understand what we're looking at. Sometimes it can get a little geeked out, and sometimes curators can start playing, just like DJs can just start playing, for other DJs, or, curators will start mounting shows that resonate particularly well with the donor set. It's all very snarky and juvenile. I think largely curators are important and do a great story. Having said that, for us, the opportunity to work directly with the artists to curate the shows is unique to the art form that we're in, because as a contemporary medium, photography, most of the artists that we work with are still very much active.
And by the way, Corinne Ernie is the one of the main curators at the Paris Museum in the Hamptons, which is it's a great independent museum designed by Herzog de Meuron. And she's Swiss German, if I remember correctly. So
she's here, and I'm unmuting her right now.
Thank you. I was muted for all this time. Thanks. I was just curious, Yoram, because I saw the latest exhibition at Fotografiska New York, and it's very well curated. And, I'm really glad that you guys are all talking about, space and audience engagement. And that's obviously what a lot of museums are talking about these days. And I could tell you definitely address those topics. And I also remember you said that you work directly with artists, and that's why I was curious, where does the curator come in? Do you work with curators? Do you hire curators? How do you operate in that sense?
Sometimes. So we have a lot of artists who have a very distinct point of view and actually don't want anybody else mixing it in. We just basically work on a layout with them. They want to tell the story. They help us develop the text around it, the way that we present the work. Sometimes we work with a number of curators. Nadine Bach just curated a show. She's done several shows with us. Sometimes we work with the estates, when we've shown Helen Newton, Irving Penn, people like that. And that's where the estate comes in and says, we have a very specific way of wanting to tell that story. And frankly, sometimes curators come to us with a really great idea and an ability to execute on that idea. There's a lot of ideas in this world, but if somebody says, I have an idea for a show, and here's the following people that I can get involved in this, that's a really wonderful conversation to have.
Happy to have these conversations with you.
And by the way, Corinne and Yoram, I think you guys would have a great dialogue. Yoram, next time you're in New York, I'll make sure to put see if we can have a coffee with your Corinne. She's curated. She used to do Ideas City, which is a really interesting nomadic series of events that had everyone from David Byrne to various. It was kind of a freewheeling festival of ideas. Is that a good way to describe it, Corinne?
Absolutely, and that was with the new museum. So obviously a lot of thinking about space, urbanism, art and urban, spaces, public-private relationships. And Mitch, I really like what you said about public libraries. I think those are one of the most amazing institutions and totally undervalued and not, not known enough. And I think a mix between, what a museum does and what library does could be really amazing. And public, private partnerships would be amazing in that sense.
And I don't know, COVID related, when I can get a chance to get into town, but you should talk to Amanda Hajar, who runs the exhibition program here in the US. So you can see her in the comments. So Paul and I and all will make connections to everyone and get that conversation going.
Yeah. We're a conspiracy of progress here at the Brooklyn Rail.
So our next question will come from Mike Pell, who you should be able to turn on your microphone now.
Hey, Mitch. Hey, Yoram. Hey. And Paul. Fantastic discussion. Fantastic questions. So, you know me. I come from the digital world. I know I'm hearing like a little bit of a physical space bias, but I'm going to ask you to open up your minds a little. Okay, come on, go with me here. I want to ask, how do you transfer the soul of a museum or a public library into the digital realm? Like, what is it at its heart and soul? Like, what is that most important element that we have to try to recreate, not to replace, but to augment?
Wow. Well, yeah, we could do a seminar on that as a topic, starting from Bachelard's Poetics of Space and just getting into phenomenology, and then mostly what the deconstructivists said or didn't say. And that's a very big question, Mike. I think that and
make it simple, Mitch.
It's architectural in nature. First of all, the soul itself, and whether we have free will, these are and what does it mean to be sentient? We don't have a way of even explaining that in any physicalist form in any of the sciences. We know it exists, but there's no proof of the soul. There's no proof of sentience. I know I think, therefore I am, but I have no idea, if you're really there. This is just a figment of my imagination. I'm not going to get into all of continental philosophy, but if you want to get to the soul of buildings or spaces, I mean, they are experienced physically, because even if you're there and you can't occupy it, you could still imagine. You can project yourself into these other canyons or other, into ceilings or to, nooks and crannies or reflections through mirrors or, just moving through some kind of staircase or circulatory mechanism. Like those things are very real, and they expand your understanding of yourself and the world around you. To do that digitally, we would do it absolutely. You can do it digitally. It would just be a different thing. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I don't know if we could, sort of digitize and then recreate that experience exactly into, a world that's completely holographic or some other fashion. And I don't know whether we should. I'm struggling for an analogy. There's nothing wrong with hearing music in person. You go to see the New York Philharmonic, it's fantastic. And you experience that in, some headphones someplace else, and it's a different experience. They both have tremendous value, but we still, until you can actually fully replace what it's like to experience music in person, we're always going to have digital alternatives, and they'll just be a different way of encountering it. I guess that would be the way of saying that. So I'm an advocate for both. And what's wrong with diversity? I guess that.
And by the way, I want to intervene just for a moment and show you guys this. The gentleman who just spoke is Mike Pell. He is the director of Microsoft's Innovation Lab, the Garage, which is at 300 Lafayette Street. It just opened across from the REI. If you ever, I go to REI all the time. You guys will see me there looking at new Patagonia gear before I go hiking. But this is a huge building that it used to be a gas station with guys selling Pakistani food from the little street trucks. And that's been demolished. Anybody who knows the history of New York, that was a classic late night spot if you were out really late. My studio used to be down the street from there. And also, what was it, Wang Chung Studios, which is where Wu-Tang Clan used to record. So that's off of between Crosby and Lafayette at Houston. So Mike is doing, it's a new building that was designed by, if I remember correctly, the architects are Cook Fox Architects. It's not open yet because of COVID issues, but Mike, do you want to talk about your building for a moment? Because I think you and Yoram might have some fun comparative notes. Yoram, when you're in New York, I'll point the building out next time.
I walked by it. I was there, man. I think I actually walked. I mean, I happened to be in the city, like, when was that? In October or November? And I think it was pretty much done.
Yeah.
And I think the windows are still stuck, right? I mean, I think they're still covered from the inside with paper.
They took the plywood down.
Oh, they did? Well, right, because everybody's done getting angry.
But one of so Paul, thank you, Paul. So one of the things that we are doing in the Microsoft Garage is we have an art gallery space that I would love to talk to all of you about, because we want to feature people from the New York ecosystem. It's sort of that collision of art and technology and people exploring and being innovative. But the reason I asked the question, how do you find, or how do you transfer the soul from these amazing physical places that we've all gone into the digital realm, is that we've had to bridge this pandemic divide by trying to offer something, that's a teaser, that's a, sort of a taste of things to come. That's why I was asking, is there something about the scale of museums, right? So like Mitch, you were talking about the space. Is there something about the wonder of seeing the lighting and the shadow and again, I know you can't reproduce it exactly, but I was just kind of curious from your perspective and yours too, Yoram, is there something about that experience of being in a museum, being in this wonderfully curated exhibit that we can try to recreate in some way, not one-to-one, not a photorealistically rendered VR experience necessarily, but some way to capture that wonder of being in these physical places. So that's what we're looking at.
I'll go first because Mitch has spent more time thinking about this, but my fast answer would almost be no. I feel like I've had spiritual digital experiences wherever I've had them. I mean, I've been at AVAC or at Twilo. I'm pretty sure I touched the face of God at those nightclubs, but for whatever reason. Music, baby. Well curated by skilled DJs. And every time I play a track like that in the car, it's awesome. And I don't want to get out of the car till I finished it. And it recalls that for me. And I'll see images at the museum and they're in my head forever, man. And I like that. And so I don't know how you can reproduce, but I think you can create your own.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you. So I think the short answer is you can't. Not that you shouldn't try.
That's mine. I don't know. Mitch is better at this than I am.
Well, ask yourself, like, in an ecclesiastical structure, like you go and if you're religious and you want to pray in a church or a temple, a cathedral, a mosque, do you think the Hagia Sophia can be easily replaced with a digital version? It's got, 3,000 years of history, and all different religions have clashed in that space. The space is charged. It is real, and it happened in that space. So whether it's prophets that walk through or thousands of converts, it's something that's very real. When you're in a museum and you're before a relic or a work of art that actually was touched by someone significant, a Van Gogh or Da Vinci or what have you, how do you possibly replace that connection? Those things have a sense of life that is undeniable, and no matter what you do digitally, it won't be the same. And I don't think you'll feel the same. Again, I don't think it's a bad thing to give more access to it and to experience it in different ways. But and it doesn't have to be grand spaces either. I mean, imagine if this was a place where your father died. Do you think you can digitally recreate that space and go there to remember your father? Or would you go to that actual place where he disappeared or lost his life and then have your moment of remembrance there? So museums capture that incredible charge. And so when we talk about spirituality, not necessarily replaceable, but you can think of these things as different, and they have just the same, they have a different value. I'm still going to say the same thing, but it's not necessarily easily uploaded. We haven't figured that out yet, and I don't know how.
You know what? Actually, hold on for a second. We have someone in the audience, Amanda Chauchet. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing her name right. Hey, Amanda. She does a project called Micro Museums. I just want to show you guys this really quickly. She's working on, that's at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I love this. That's in our spaces. Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, and these are museums where they're kind of looking at information architecture, which is a coin by the architect Richard Saul Wurman. If you guys don't know, he started the TED conference. But Amanda, do you want to riff for a second if you can jump in? Because I think between you, Mike Pell, Mitch, and Yoram, there's some really intriguing philosophies of museums going on here. This is one of her pieces where the whole museum is about information and it interacts with your phone and so on.
Yeah.
Hey.
Thanks. Yeah. Hey. Good to see you all. Yeah. I mean, Mike, to your question, like Micro's mission is to distribute the museum experience. And so we put them in places where people already are. So like in New York, they're in the hospital systems and the court systems and libraries, also in places like Rock Center. And we've thought so much about how do you impart that like wow experience of being at a museum in these little columns. So we play around with like normal museum, like gallery design ideas, like using super text. You know, you can see there's boxes in there that draw your face in closer. So when you get close to it, you start to feel like you're in that room. You know, we use sculptures and scale in that way. So I do think that there is, you know, like what we've seen from these out in the field, like there is a way to help distribute that feeling of a well-curated, well-designed museum. But it's more accessible.
Because Mitch had me about to give up on this completely. So thank you for telling me that you can still experiment.
I'm a dogged optimist, even though as a former ecologist, I shouldn't be. But yeah, I would love to brainstorm with anyone around this. I love trying to get that feeling out there, and yeah.
Yeah, I can attest to, hey, Amanda, how's it going? Just absolutely love the micro museums. They are in the same kind of maker village that we share at Terreform at the New Lab. You guys were there for some time. They're supremely well crafted, well curated, just an enormously, you know, a wonderful experience. I just love looking at them, putting my nose right up to it and kind of reading what the text is and looking at these micro displays. Fascinating, really, really fascinating work.
Yeah, micro museums. So how are we for time, Malvika?
We're good. We're actually, Fong has written in and said we're going to squeeze in the last 3 questions. Is that okay with everyone?
Okay.
All right, so our next question will come from Aparna Mukherjee, which is jumping off of Mike's question, I believe. And Aparna, you can turn on your microphone now.
Create spaces, but I think this came up in the comments as well.
Aparna, do you mind?
Yeah, your voice is very low.
Your voice is very low. Do you mind?
I'm sorry, I'm on a weird, my Wi-Fi is down, so this is on the phone, which is why I'm also not coming on camera. Maybe you could just repeat the question for me, but I think just what is the complement that you're seeing with immersive technologies that could, if not recreate, complement the space?
Sure. So I can also just read her original question, which is following up on Mike's question in a literal way. Is there anything on the sensory, immersive, haptic fronts apart from VR that's inspiring to you?
I mean, there's a ton of things that one can do to continue on Mike's question. You know, there's anything from, you know, completely immersive suits that can give you a sense of vibration and smell to things you can't do in real life. I mean, someone was talking about parametricized data. You can see and experience spaces that are impossible to create in the real world. That is the big advantage of the digital holographic or the VR or mixed reality versions. So you can instead of seeing, you know, something that you can only experience with your body, you can see something as if you had 500 eyes and you were, in a continuous like matrix with like 50 other people looking at it from every possible angle, and then change and curate the exhibit on the fly yourself. So that is the possibility of the digital. The digital gives you this kind of constant ability to remix. It makes you, I guess, your own DJ and how you experience the space. And that's just, the beginning of something like that. So there's a million ways you can use computation to kind of really, really create a whole new realm of experience.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, thanks so much. And our next question will come from Suzanne Ventura, who you can unmute your microphone now.
Okay, great, thank you. I come to the event wearing two hats. One, I've been a sustainability reporter in New York for the last 3 years, the only sustainability reporter, if you could imagine, and covering all the sectors of sustainability, which interestingly enough, do not coordinate with each other. They're not connected. They're all in their silos doing their thing. And I wonder if in a scenario like this, my other hat I'm wearing is as a friend of the Eric Adams for Mayor campaign. So my question is with regard to the planning and preparation, funding, whatever, do you work with your local government? What kind of a role do they play? Are they helpful? What has been your experience? Because I know Eric has an integrative plan and he's open to hear all these things, but I wonder if you have utilize that in the past. I look at Arcadia Earth. That's a museum that should not be struggling, but is. And I wonder if they built the museum with an interdependent relationship on the city, would they be getting more traffic in there? Would they not be struggling as much?
Oh, I know Valentino, the guy who started it, Valentino Vittori.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, they closed, I believe. I go jogging past there occasionally. If you're on Broadway, it's next to the golden arches of the McDonald's. Yeah, so it's a tragedy. It's a great spot. It was just called Arcadia, and I think that they're going to reboot after the whole pandemic. There's so many empty spaces right now in the city. It was a great idea. I think they're going to just take a sabbatical, so to speak, for a little bit. But it's a great idea, great space.
Well, so in answer to the question, have you built any relationships with local government around your spaces and around building traffic into the space or integrating it into other programs that may dovetail with the same purpose?
I'll just say something real quick. We were working with the de Blasio administration under Mark Chambers, who runs the Office of Sustainability. Right. You're probably familiar with him. They have helped fund Terreform, and we've been working on projects with them off and on for years. Of course, the pandemic has stopped that kind of work, but I'm glad you're doing the work that you're doing. And the message of sustainability has so many different layers and is often confusing to the public. So we do need kind of a way of unifying that message. The United Nations is certainly helping organize that, but can never have enough of this this kind of messaging out there. So thanks for doing the work you're doing.
Do you have your sights set on any of the new people? Like, do you do that? Do you reach out to contenders, or do you wait to whomever is in office before you sort of build alliances and relationships and things?
Well, Terreform as a fairly diverse board. Paul's on it. Alex, who's somewhere here, also is on it, and I guess they're always looking to connect with those in political positions to continue the work on sustainability. New York is getting much more active. Even under Bloomberg, we had the Green NYC plan. I mean, it's been a lot of lip service towards it. It's been more difficult to actually implement it and make it happen. So it's the public that needs to represent that will, and then the experts that are out there can actually get it underway. So it's a quick analogy. It's similar. Sustainability is similar to an airplane, where people should choose where they go, and they need to make that decision that they want to be sustainable. But then once people make that decision, it's up to the pilots and the experts and the air traffic controllers and those people to actually bring us to that particular position. And right now, people are still fighting over where the plane goes.
Thank you for that analogy. And thank you, Suzanne, for your questions, keeping us all accountable. Also optimistic, I feel. Our final question will come from our very own publisher and the captain of this fine ship, Phong H. Bui. Phong, you can turn on your microphone now.
Thank you, Malvika. Thank you, Yoram. Mitchell.
Thank you for having this place, this online place, this thing. It's just remarkable. I'm so impressed by everything that the Brooklyn Rail is, the way you conduct these talks. I've spent hours over the last few days and last week just listening to old talks. You guys are doing a thing, man.
Thank you so much. I think you guys are all marvelously insane. You probably, along with AOC, are the Neanderthal GOP's worst nightmare. So I have a few comments before I get to my haiku question, which is in regarding to my question earlier about whether a space or museum have a soul. It's interesting because in my interview with Carl Andre, that was in 2012, I think, in February issue, where I asked, how would you remember all the show you've done, or how would you remember, like the most memorable show of your life? And he said, if he had the miraculous power, he would very much transform everyone back in 1970. Is retrospective at the Guggenheim, you know? And I say, why? Because he say, well, it's just when I enter through the door, I would stand right in the middle of my 36 piece of work. It's a very big immersive work in the middle. And I look up and I don't see anything. So I don't see anything. So that's Carl Andre's most memorable exhibition. The reason why I brought it up, because how would we equate the way in which architecture would build the way they aspire to build as a work of art? The building then becomes a work of art. Therefore, it can have some kind of impediment, preventing all the works of art to be installed the way that the artist would have less a problem. So that's what I was thinking about the space, which bring back to the poetic with space. Mitchell, you mentioned about that famous Gaston Bachelard. Believe it or not, that book was published in 1958, during the time when Dory Aston, our late friend, was the cultural critic for New York Times, and she was in Paris, saw the book, wrote him a fan letter, and then he responded it. She brought back to New York, and then it was published ultimately by Howard Greenfeld of Orient Press in 1964. It's an amazing, influential book, as you know, all of it. And then lastly, to Paul's point, reference to André Malraux, who was a very important voice, even growing up in Vietnam. That's where I'm from, because he created a very famous progressive newspaper. It's called L'Indochine, advocating for Vietnamese independence. And he, of course, became the cultural minister under de Gaulle, right after the Second World War. So that's the condition of how, cultural minister, which Americans don't have, in Europe tend to have it, but not America. All right, so now my question is now we're getting to it, title that in together, but the question is this. I sit on 12 boards, nonprofit and foundation. And what I realized in the last several years, it's particularly now during the pandemic, it brought out this necessity to cross-pollinate, to share resources, not so much in capital, but ideas. And I know for the longest time, a lot of those nonprofits or institutions tend to be very insular, very competitive from one another. I think what we're going through now, to your point, Mitchell, is beginning to open up. I think the idea must be shared, resource must be somehow communicated broadly and clearly, so people can work together. This is like would be the right worst nightmare, which I mentioned earlier. So would you agree with view in your own practice?
Well, first, I share Yoram's sentiments. Brooklyn Rail is fantastic. It's great to be a part of this conversation. There's been many others. So the work that's happening here is exactly what almost answers your own question. It's whether we can import that into an architecture and a museum that is art. Yes, I think it's just architecture tends to be a lot slower than most other art forms because you have to build a building, and that takes you know, as Yoram knows and others here, it's just, you know, there's like probably 5 to 10 years of pre-planning before you even break ground. Or if you're going to go to something that's adaptive reuse or upgrading existing buildings, that also just takes a lot of time and development and fundraising and planning. So can architecture reach a level of art? Yes, I think it does mostly, especially when we want to consider a convergence, like you were saying, with the poetic of space and the artists themselves. I think it does that when the inhabitants of the building actually continuously transform it themselves. And I think that's kind of key. I mean, early PS1, MoMA was, I mean, the artists just overran that space, and there's so many crazy little moments in there that would be almost impossible to do now in a more professional sort of, you know, corporate level, you know, large scale blockbuster museum, that you couldn't really make some of these areas. There'd be issues with handicap accessibility, which are important, or areas that are just dangerous for kids, etc. So, you know, I'm glad a lot of that character is still kept in a building that wasn't even designed to be a museum in the first place. And it is one of my favorite museums because you experience it in a way that is phenomenal. And the artists themselves are constantly changing it. And we allow them to do that, whether they're putting strange slides in there or weird videos on the floor or rooms that you can, that actually sort of caress the body as you experience them. I mean, that makes a living architecture, one that is constantly being physically added to by its inhabitants, curators, or those that use it. The Sagrada Familia is a sort of a building that, to me, is one of my favorites by Gaudi in Barcelona, because it's still under construction. It's still thinking about what it could be to the future and what it means to the people of Barcelona, those who worship there and those who just come to visit. So I think it's just crucial that you think of these buildings in deep relationship and a symbiotic relationship with those that inhabit them and use them.
Yeah, it's true. Because also it brings to the question of scale, which is a psychological condition. It's not scientific, measurable through to which the building is made. It's also a job of the curator to present a show according to the space given, not predetermined. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead, Paul.
So one of the things at the end of the day, I mean, there's been this kind of series of situations in New York. I mean, the tragedy of Grand Central, you know, where if you look at what happened with architecture and like what's going on with the new Moynihan Center, you know, it's kind of been wild to see how New York cannibalizes historical space. And the pandemic has set up a situation where we're now facing a crisis of where there's huge volume of empty space. And I'm curious to see, because in the 1970s, what happened is graffiti, kids, the train system was going wild. There's a very famous headline from Ford. It says, "From Ford to New York City, drop dead." And artists like Julian Schnabel, for example, traded, if I remember correctly, like 2 paintings. He has this huge building on the West Side Highway, but that used to be where they kept all the trash trucks in New York. And if you think about it, like right now, we're in a crisis of urban uncertainty that the pandemic has leveled, and then the market forces around empty space are going to be really lingering over the city for a long time. So this is the time to play. I think it's, personally, if it wasn't a pandemic, I'd be throwing wild pop-up parties. I've thrown parties on top of the World Trade Center. Yoram, you probably came to some of the events I used to do at Save the Robots way back in the day, maybe.
Yep.
But, you know, there's so much empty space right now that is really intriguing. I think right now we need to rethink emptiness, because like if you go through Midtown, there's all these homeless folks who have been put up in crazy hotels, for example. And you'll see people coming out of, I'm sorry, it's Penn Station. Sorry, that was a glitch there. But Penn Station, for example, if you ever, I've been at concerts at Penn Station, you know, and every time I think about what they did to the former train station, they just wiped it out and did a crazy real estate deal. And so Moynihan is kind of like a penance for that, you know, the SOM designed. But in Germany or China, they would have built this train station in a much cooler way, much more dynamic architecture. And regretfully, we're still seeing that sort of tension. And so Phong, thank you for bringing that up. Malvika, thanks for moderating. I know time is ticking, so I just wanted to be respectful of that.
I want to add one thing, which is I'm super optimistic about what's about to happen in New York. It's going to get more affordable. It's going to get younger. And there's an awful lot of big spaces that don't have any use for it. And I think we have some very good ideas of where we can go with it. So I think the next 5, 6, 7 years are going to be super fun.
Thank you
we can
so
throw
much.
a party. One day we'll throw a party again where people are actually, some friends of mine have this band, the Flaming Lips, and they did a concert a little while ago where everyone was in a bubble. The bass player's in a bubble, the singer's in a bubble. And you know, it was just kind of like a virtual concert that I found it really amusing. The guys who run, the singer from the band is pretty wild. Yeah. Phong, one of these days we got to talk about doing a post-pandemic Brooklyn Rail Festival, Brooklyn Fest maybe or something, where everyone can have a bubble.
We're all due. We're all hungry. We're all ready to roll, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. This has been so great. I love this event so much. Really excited about everything that you guys are discussing.
Hi. Yeah. If it's all right, Alyssa, I'll introduce you. Just so I'm here to hype you up, to get the runway, to get the plane on, and then we'll all scream like we're at the Flaming Lips. So at the Rail, we have a tradition of ending our lunches with a poem. Today has been like so spectacular, and we're so lucky to have as well, actually one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that since physical distance is less of a barrier, we get to invite actual living poets and writers who can share their work with us. So today I have the pleasure of welcoming today's poet laureate, Alyssa Clarke. She's a poet, journalist, and nonfiction author. That's her book right there. And in addition to being the executive director of the Economic Hardship Reporting Project, her writing has appeared in The Nation, in LitHub, and many others. Her reportage has appeared in the New York Times, The Guardian, and more. And her 5th book, Bootstrapped, is forthcoming with Echo HarperCollins and will address the myth of American self-reliance. So without further ado, give it up for Alissa Quart.
Hi, everybody. This is like a brilliant event. My mind is bursting, and I'm hoping I can talk to Mitch and Yoram about, and obviously Paul, who I've known since I was a kid, later on, maybe exchange ideas and emails and so forth. I'm here because I wanted to read from my book. My name is Quart, Alyssa Quart, and this is actually my most recent poetry book. It's called Thoughts and Prayers. And I was very inspired by Amanda Gorman, as I'm sure a lot of people were, but she's doing what we're doing at Economic Hardship Reporting Project, which is political poetry as part of our mandate. So we're not just doing journalism, we're also sending people out in West Virginia to interview people in mining towns and then writing poetry about it and doing photography, placing it in The Guardian. We've also done a lot of collabs with places like LitHub, et cetera, around these lines. And my own poetry shares some of these qualities. So I'm just gonna hide myself because I don't wanna keep staring at myself. How do I do this? I was trying to hide myself. I do not want to see myself.
Should I turn off your video?
Yeah, there we go. Wonderful. Okay. So, I am going to start. One of the things I like to do is I do reported poetry, as I said, and I spent a lot of time reporting in abortion clinics. I produced some films, a film called The Last Clinic, which actually nominated for an Emmy in multimedia, and then Jackson, which won an Emmy, and you can watch it on HBO. So I went down to Mississippi for years and years following this stuff. And so this is the poem that came out of that reporting, and it's called Clinic. And I'm going to do excerpts from it because it's going to, I know time is nigh and it's a long poem. Clinic. When we type abortion, autofill writes, I am pregnant. I am pregnant in Spanish. I am having a baby and have no insurance. I'm scared of having a baby. What trimester am I in? What trimester is abortion illegal? Google says, I need your love. I need an abortion. I am pregnant. Can I eat shrimp? Am I having a miscarriage? I need help paying for abortion. Abortion clinic violence. Not ready to have this baby. 2, God will punish. Old ones say in unison. They sing genocide. A man with a Santa beard and a long gun enters a clinic in Indiana. In Mississippi, it's day glow signs, floppy hats, teeny peachy fetus dolls. Their lawn chairs too near women's health. Their flesh sunscreen white, metal detectors as framing devices, surveillance cameras as glass birds. In a place like this, in America, a long gun, women afraid of dying while they are trying to find their life. And it goes on from there, and it has like lots of reporting in it. So it's sort of, she got a cold from her 2-year-old. The doctor talks her through the procedure. That's someone holding her hand, not her husband. From a Baptist town, her mother full of God. So she lied, got on a bus, drove for 3 hours, borrowed money for the hooker motel, then the overnight waiting period, wondered whether God cared or was it the care her mother managed. One girl was a sturdy teenager, signed the parental notification with a broken ballpoint. Another redheaded hottest number at bingo hall in Shreveport. Grandma drank. What about your boyfriend? She answers. He stopped talking to me. All he wanted was the baby, with her own body hurtling. One boss wouldn't let the woman sell carb parts. If she was pregnant, one minister called the clinic baby parts. And then it ends. And so I try to put some like reported, so this is like photojournalism in it. So there's photography with all of our reported poetry. Say no shame, we can say the birth spectrum of us, 1 in 4. These choices are always field work, freedom song, elegy, captivity narrative. This feeling won't forget them. This feeling won't forget you. And then I've also been doing these cut-ups that are based on news stories. So one of them is called Thoughts and Prayers, and it's composed of public statements around mourning over school shootings from political leaders and websites. Designed and executed, us gun owners, our thoughts, our team's banner, our assault style thoughts and pray for, praying impacted terrible, prayers on the scene, 15 kids, AR-15, pure evil, John 16:33, horrific, my prayers, first responders, we continue to keep the victims, kingdom of God, Columbine, thoughts and prayers, fireside basket, the thoughts and prayers, clear mount stamp, satiation, semantic, civil religion, common, spiritual language, shooting responders. And then it ends. My heart is with Parkland. My heart is running down the hall, shooting our prayers. This is all found. Like I didn't, none of it was invented. And for the final poem I'm going to read, it's about sort of being a political person growing up in the 70s and 80s and this sort of emotion around politics. And it's called Apocalypse Anyway. And it seems, I'm going to want to add on now, we're in the Biden era, but this was very Trump era, pre-COVID, but Trump era poem. Apocalypse Anyway. When I believed politicians had feelings, when Gerald Ford lost the White House on TV crying, when George H.W. Bush was laughed at for not understanding supermarkets. When I got into an Ivy, when I thought I was poor, when they had their dorm rooms professionally decorated, a Roman bust stood on the girl's dresser, her father did interiors for the Reagans. When Donald Trump was most famous for a showgirl named Marla Maples. When Donald and Marla were just bleach devouring creatures, just tabloid NYC. Back when my friend had drugs in her jeans pockets when she pulled out after her modeling jobs, when I learned women were trapped in their bodies. Back when when people listened to tormented music when they had sex, when people murmured into payphones about their mental lives, when they fucked on the phone, the dirty snow of 1991, the blizzard of 1996, gray ice, my black wool coat always too thin, hadn't learned how to keep myself warm, when weather was literal, sometimes modernist, but not yet political, when female writers made their names denying other women's suffering, when I couldn't pay my rent, when Bill Clinton was president and read a lot, but also made poor people pick up garbage by the sides of highways, when a pundit said alpha men, earth tones, when I started in the homage business, when I started in the lament business, when my favorite feeling was dirty nostalgia, when I read dispatches in a public park while my boyfriend worked at the State Department, when the next boyfriend bought Prada shoes, I wore an A-line dress in 30s green, bought near my therapist's office. I was all underbelly. When I still had a therapist because I was young and had no money, such sliding scale, and she thought my misery had promise. When I always wore chokers as if symbolizing I could withstand male aggression. When suddenly coffee was expensive, when people started moving to Seattle, when they started moving to Portland, when they started going off the grid, when Y2K was scary, when Y2K was a joke, when architects constructed Y2K themed buildings, when frosty palettes implied a future present, when I woke up, talked to everyone, when the smell of the industrial products, the cooked brown sugar, the rubber, the bodies, when after September 11th, burning buildings were collateral for wars without ends, when I biked at night with no backlights because apocalypse anyway, when elections went tabloid, but we hadn't realized yet what that would mean, when men who haunted women were still called cads, when people stopped talking on the phone, when people started talking about TV shows rather than gossiping, when people didn't talk much at all, when loving books became a vulnerability, when writing them turned into a liability, when people started taking Prozac, when people started taking Ambien, when I stopped believing in student debt, when I realized time was killing us, the protest sign, we shall overcome, when other people became my religion, when I didn't think of anyone else, when all I thought about was other people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. And thank you, Yoram, Mitch, and our favorite spooky DJ, Paul D. Miller. And of course, thanks for laughing. And of course, thank you to all of you who tuned in today in the audience and in the chat. This past October marked the Rail's 20th anniversary, and we'll keep celebrating this legacy throughout 2021 with events and conversations just like this one. So if you can, please consider making a contribution to keeping the Rail and our special projects free, relevant, and independent, like this conversation and our other project, We the Immigrants. And please join us again tomorrow when we'll be joined by yet another Mitchell, media and literary theorist, W.J.T. Mitchell, who will join Charles Bernstein for a conversation on his recent book, Mental Traveler, A Father, a Son, and a Journey Through Schizophrenia. That will be, as always, at 1 p.m. right here in the Zoom. I'm going to invite you all to turn your microphones and say goodbye.
Hold
go
on,
ahead. Yeah.
Tiny, quick. I also just want to say thank you to Yoram and to Mitchell. Terreform ONE is doing amazing work with thinking about revisiting the idea of urban sustainable design, and what Yoram's doing with his museum is incredible. His a bunch of museums. So these are all things where we look at the potentialities, and with the conversations I've curated, I'm always a fan of saying, how do we get people to get into rethinking what is possible? And amusingly enough, I feel like, on one hand, we had this pandemic and we're now moving into an era of biopolitics, the way that the vaccines and all of these different things are going to be really making us think about physical space. But, I feel like Trump was a mental pandemic, and now we're kind of like, we're done with it. So hopefully, we can just figure. But thanks, everybody. And Mitchell, Yoram, thanks so much for joining us. And Yoram, we're going to have a drink, hopefully, when you're coming to town. And Mitchell, we're due for a social distance outdoor beer one of these days.
Mid-February.
And Fong, thank you as well.
Fong.
Thank you.
Spooky, on fire, guys. Thank you.
Joram.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Paul, Mitch, Laura.
Thank you,
Thank
Paul.
you.
Cheers, guys.
Thank
Thank you.
you, Mitch. Thank you, Alyssa.
Alyssa.
It's been fabulous.
Yes.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay.
Thank you,
All right.
Paul.
Thanks, everybody.
Merci, you're getting spooky.
Much love and courage. We
Thanks.
invite you.
Bye, Alyssa.
I love this part. This is great. Bye, everybody.